Hi, this is Barre-Sinoussi and welcome to Corrupt Science and Medicine. Ideally I would have waited until I've had got a proper camera and my microphone thing set up, but I had to do that without just make do for the time being. One thing I'm going to talk about is the coronavirus, as are most other people. However, I'm going to go a lot deeper into some of the potential issues and actual issues than most other people. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is virology itself and some of the problems. The first thing to say though is that I know that a number of people have died, and that's obviously a real disaster. One of the questions though is, of course, whether all those deaths can necessarily be justifiably attributed to the coronavirus, and also there's the issue of all the diagnoses as well. We're going to look at those later. So what I'm going to do, first of all, talk about virology, which I've had a significant degree of involvement in over the last couple of decades. And one thing that the scientific discipline of virology lacks most is scientific discipline. The reason for that is that it's been getting away with very poor quality, really shoddy science for quite a long time, and really has never been properly held to account. So to give you an example of that, about 1972, I think it was, there was a symposium held at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, where they decided the rules for identifying new retroviruses. And 10 years later, when Luc Montagnier's team claimed they'd found this new retrovirus, which subsequently became known as HIV, all those rules that had previously been agreed were thrown out of the window. And what's even more remarkable is that the secretary of the proceedings at that symposium, Françoise Barre-Sinoussi, who was one of Montagnier's team and was also one of the recipients of the Nobel Prize, she had been the secretary of the proceedings, and yet there was no explanation as to why they were completely abandoning all the rules they previously defined. And in fact what they used was eventually a whole load of non-specific phenomena, things that were already known to be non-specific and with very poor rules of logic, to claim they'd found this new virus. They were not properly picked up on it. Those that did pick them up on it were basically ignored, and subsequently they were awarded the Nobel Prize. And Montagnier even admitted years later that they'd used a collection of non-specific phenomena. Following on from that, you had Robert Gallo, who basically was the world's most successful scientific fraudster. In his claim to have found the probable cause of AIDS, he committed multiple frauds. And to give you an example of that, just one of these frauds was that in the samples he was using to make this claim, he had just been told by the electron microscopist that there are no retroviruses in your sample. And that was the basis of his claim to have found a retrovirus as being the probable cause of AIDS. Now, all his chicanery came to light a little bit gradually over a period of time, multiple investigations, and so eventually quite a large body of evidence had built up. But by that time, his original work, fraudulent claims, and Luc Montagnier's team's work, they were together at the apex of this inverted pyramid of a massive body of, let's call it science, and of course huge amounts of industry. And so really there were vested interests which stopped Robert Gallo being found guilty of scientific misconduct, and so he essentially got away with it. So when you've got a branch of science behaving like that, and getting away with it, I would expect that to continue. And the reason is that one of the things I've been studying a lot over the last several decades is disasters in man-made systems. And so I've built up some laws about that. So the first one is, so Hersey's first law of disasters in man-made systems is, in an influential area of organised human activity, if there is no effective external moderating influence, then it will become corrupt, regardless of how honourable its original intentions. Okay. The second law of Hersey's second law of disasters in man-made systems is, once an influential area of organised human activity becomes corrupt, it will stay corrupt until acted upon by an external force. So if we take those two together, then essentially what we're talking about, if you look at it from a systems perspective, then essentially what we can say is that integrity in an influential area of, a man-made integrity in an influential area of organised human activity is an unstable state, and corruption is a stable state. So in other words, once things it's easy for things to become corrupt, and they will stay corrupt until corrected externally. And if you can come up with an example that counteracts that, I'd really like to hear it. So put that in the comments or whatever. So because they've been getting away with really bad science for quite a long time, and they've never been properly called to account on it, I would expect that to continue. I would expect the really bad science to be continuing. And to give you an example of some of the questions I have, I saw this morning, for example, a 3D computer generated image of this coronavirus, and I thought, I wonder if there's any electron microscopy of it actually in human blood. And the reason for that is that I'm sure over the years you might have seen images, computer generated images or whatever, of HIV supposedly in, and what you'll find, in fact, if you look in the medical literature, is that there are no examples of this virus being found directly in human blood. You imagine it's there, and they want you to believe it's there, but no one's ever actually demonstrated it. What they have done, there have been a couple of cases, I think mostly where people have had leukemia. Certainly this applied to the first case, I think, where they had a bone marrow transplant, and they said that this guy had been functionally cured, and they showed electron microscopy of his blood showing no viral particles to say, look, see, he's cured. But they've never shown any viral particles in blood to show someone has got HIV. So that's really not proving anything at all. That's some of the bad science that they've got away with. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that video there, and in the next video I'll talk about some of aspects of the human body that you may not be aware of, and this will begin to shed a little bit more light on why virology can sometimes interpret things incorrectly. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.